Good morning, and thank you for joining me for Mississauga's weekly update. Today I am joined by Peter Sturgeon, the president of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress Toronto chapter. I've asked Peter to join us to talk a little bit about what he's been hearing from people on the ground in Ukraine and how Mississaugans can get involved to support the Ukrainian relief effort. But I first want to note that today's update is the first one without Dr. Lowe or someone from his team at Peel Public Health, given the positive and stable position we are in right now with COVID. But I will, of course, keep these going because we've heard from so many residents who really appreciate being updated on what's happening across our city. And the big news, of course, not only for Mississaugans, but the entire province, was yesterday's announcement that the Ontario government will be lifting the province-wide mask mandate for most public settings beginning on March 21st. This is a clear signal to all of us that we have truly arrived at the next phase of this pandemic, a time when we really do have to learn to live with COVID. The reality is that we are well past the Omicron surge, and hospitalizations have dramatically decreased across the province and here in the city. Trillium Health Partners, for example, is dealing with approximately 30 cases of COVID hospitalizations and only 3 patients in the ICU. In addition, only about 3% of people in Peel region are testing positive for COVID on a PCR test. The vast majority of our residents have received at least 2 doses of the vaccine, with more and more getting boosted every day. It's clear that we all have the right ingredients in place to start getting back to normal. But I entirely understand why some people think lifting the mask mandate on March 21st is a bit too soon. Frankly, I do too, particularly because we just eased the last remaining capacity limits on businesses and other settings, as well as proof of vaccination requirements, and haven't had a chance to see what the impacts might be on our hospitals. Right now, they're in a good place, but we still need time to recover and ramp back up to full surgical capacity. But the reality is that very soon, masking will be about choice, and I encourage people to do what they are comfortable with. But we know COVID is not over yet and is not going away anytime soon. We're still seeing lots of people contracting it each and every day, so it is important that we all do our part to keep our friends, neighbors, colleagues, and the community safe. And the truth is that many people in our community are immunocompromised and still uncomfortable in settings where not everyone is masked. We should all respect that. We got to this point in the pandemic because we looked out for one another, and we made sacrifices to protect the greater good. We also heard Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Moore, say just yesterday that removing the mask mandate does not mean the risk is gone. That's why he highly encourages that those most vulnerable to the virus continue to wearing their masks after March 21st. And I'm thankful masks will still be required on public transit, in long-term care homes, and in public health and congregate settings until at least April 27th. And I encourage the province to keep masking in place longer in these high-risk settings if the health trends warrant. We need to continue to protect those most vulnerable in our community. And I know the province will not hesitate to ensure that we have the right measures in place to keep us healthy and keep us moving in the right direction. If that means we have to bring back measures such as proof of vaccination or capacity limits that we know work and are effective, so be it. But at this time, I remain optimistic that trends will continue in the right direction, and that won't be the case. At the City of Mississauga, we will be making a decision on March 23rd about our own citywide mask mandate, which is set to expire at the end of the month. I do anticipate the decision will be to align with the province and lift the mandate, as Dr. Lowe has indicated he will not be implementing any additional measures. As we do move forward to get back to normal, it's important we never forget the lives that have been lost because of this virus. Tomorrow, March 11th, marks the 2-year anniversary of the World Health Organization's declaration of COVID as a pandemic, and it has been designated in Canada as a National Day of Observance to commemorate those who have died due to the virus. Tomorrow, we will honor and remember the more than 6 million people who died worldwide from COVID, the 37,000 Canadians, the 12,500 Ontarians, and close to 700 Mississaugans. And now I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk briefly about International Women's Day. I hosted a wonderful virtual celebration on Tuesday where we were joined by hundreds of community members and students and staff from close to 20 schools across Mississauga, as well as Katie Vincent, an Olympic bronze medal canoeist who talked about her Olympic journey. And while International Women's Day is an important time to celebrate the achievements of women, it's also an opportunity to have a candid conversation about the barriers that women are still facing. The reality is that COVID-19 has hit women harder than men, exacerbating already existing economic and social disparities, what's been termed the she-cession. Many women, for example, have had to scale back their careers or leave the workplace altogether to take care of children and their elderly parents during the pandemic. And what's even more concerning is that women who are part of racialized or marginalized groups appear to have been impacted even more. A recent study revealed that 25% of women are now considering leaving the workforce altogether as a result of the pandemic. And that number is nearly double for South Asian women. This should be of particular concern for us here in Peel Region, as we're home to one of the largest South Asian communities in Canada. As we come out of the pandemic, we need to realize that in order to fully recover, we will need to ensure an inclusive economic recovery. And we know for a very long time that providing families with universal and affordable childcare is one of the key ways we can ensure women don't have to choose between their family and their careers. I'm very encouraged that the Ontario government has now submitted its plan to the federal government on how it intends to reduce fees and create new spaces with the federal funding that's been made available. This means that we're one step closer to finally getting a childcare deal here in Ontario that could see childcare costs reduced in half by the end of the year and $10 a day childcare within 5 years. I highly encourage both the federal and provincial governments to reach an agreement as soon as possible. We know that if a deal isn't reached before the end of the month, the first year of federal funding could lapse, which would result in Ontario families potentially missing out on thousands of dollars that could go to childcare. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the situation in Ukraine. Like so many people across Mississauga, I'm angry. I'm heartbroken about this tragedy we see unfolding. I was particularly horrified that yesterday a maternity and children's hospital in Mariupol was destroyed by Russian airstrike, killing 3 people, including a child. Every day, Ukrainian cities are being shelled and bombed, and thousands of Ukrainians are fleeing across the border into neighboring countries. I've been trying to put myself in their shoes and imagine what it would be like if we faced the same kind of devastation here in Mississauga or across Canada. And I'm grateful that European countries like Poland, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Estonia, Belgium, and Germany are all stepping up to take in refugees fleeing the conflict. I'm also grateful that Prime Minister Trudeau and the Canadian government continues to provide Ukraine with what they need to defend themselves, while also continuing to stand with our international allies to punish Russia for this brutal and unprovoked attack. And of course, I'm also grateful for how so many Canadians have rallied together to support the people of Ukraine. From financial donations to collecting non-perishable food items and clothing, medical equipment, this is all very helpful. And to talk more about the situation on the ground in Ukraine and how Mississaugans can continue to support the relief effort, I now invite Peter Sturin, President of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Toronto chapter, to say a few words. Peter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Crombie. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to all the citizens of Mississauga that have been helping out and reaching out to the Ukrainian community and assisting us in so many different ways. The outpouring of help and assistance and kind words has been truly meaningful and heartwarming to all of us Ukrainian Canadians that are working with volunteer forces all across the world in helping Ukraine in this really tragic time. As you've mentioned, the horrors in Ukraine continue. Yesterday's bombing of a maternity ward and children's hospital with a 500-kilogram bomb is just beyond the pale. It is a war crime of the greatest order. And today, unfortunately, a lot of that bombing of innocent citizens continue as Mariupol is under siege. Anywhere from 300,000 to 400,000 people are still stuck in that city with no water, no heating, no gas, completely cut off. The Russian forces continue to refuse to let them out. They're basically holding them as hostage. But at the same time, Ukrainian forces have major wins. Kyiv is still standing strong. Major cities like Odessa, Kharkiv is under attack, but is still under Ukrainian control. So the Ukrainian forces are taking it to the Russians and really making them pay the price for their war crimes. So we know that Ukraine will prevail. There's still 40+ million people in Ukraine that are not leaving, have no intention to leave, and will bring down this evil war that Mr. Putin and his henchmen have launched on a population that really wanted nothing more than peace and freedom. So here in the Toronto community, we've been working with various humanitarian groups. We have a foundation called the Canada-Ukrainian Foundation, cufoundation.ca, if people would like to make a donation. Over $1 million of humanitarian aid has been shipped into Ukraine within the last 2 weeks. We're raising more funds and we're continuing to provide whatever is required on the humanitarian front, anything from medical equipment and supplies to food, blankets and such. So that if people are interested in making a donation, that's one place that they can do. So it's cufoundation.ca. Another initiative that we have from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress on a national scale is we're collecting names and organizations, names of individuals and organizations that would like to offer support for the impeding refugee influx. We've actually seen over the last few days already refugees coming in from Poland, from Ukraine, obviously, coming into Toronto. We estimate there'll be thousands. Even if only 1 or 2% of those refugees ended up in the GTA, that would be 20,000 people. So we're working with the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipalities to provide maximum support. And if people wanted to donate anything for that cause, particularly we're going to be looking for people that have maybe residential space where families can temporarily set up before they establish themselves. You can go to our website, ucc.ca, and there is how can I help form that people can fill in, and we're collecting a database where we'll be able to direct people for that support. So I thank you very much, Mayor Crombie, for having me on, and again, thank you to all the people that are assisting in this very critical time for the Ukrainian community, and I look forward to working with all of you in the future. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Peter. I want to thank you and the Ukrainian Canadian Congress for the incredible work that you're doing in supporting both the Ukrainian people and members of our Ukrainian community. Before I take questions from the media, I just want to briefly touch on a major announcement from last week here in our city. On Friday, I joined Prime Minister Trudeau, Federal Transportation Minister and local MP Omar Alghabra, and Ontario's Associate Minister of Transportation, Stan Cho, along with local councillors to announce a historic $675 million investment in 3 transit projects for our city, including building the first stretch of the bus rapid transit system along Dundas. This investment by all 3 levels of government show that big things can happen when we all unite in a vision to build strong and healthy communities. I can't wait to see shovels in the ground in 2024. The investment will also allow us to make upgrades to our existing bus corridors and purchase 358 second-generation hybrid buses, critical to helping us reach our climate goals. A very big thank you to our federal and provincial partners for helping us build a regionally integrated transit system that will improve people's lives. And now, along with Peter Sturren, I'm happy to take questions from the media.
Mayor Crombie, your first message comes from Declan Finnegan at Mississauga. Go ahead, Declan.
Mayor Crombie, how are you?
I'm very well, Declan. Thank you for joining.
Oh, great, thank you. I'm just yesterday a question was asked at General Committee about the Integrity Commissioner's report into the Councillor Starr and Councillor Rass matter. And I'm just wondering, initially the report was to come back to council by March. Now it's looking like April. Is there a specific reason for the delay, or is it just scheduling, or?
Yes, this is entirely in the hands of the Integrity Commissioner. When I followed up personally, I was told that the report was on track to be delivered mid-April, and all I can suggest is the Integrity Commissioner is doing his due diligence and reviewing the matter very seriously.
Follow-up?
Yes, please. Is for you, Mayor, and also for Mr. Sturren, just with respect to the humanitarian relief efforts in Mississauga. I know St. Mary's Ukrainian Catholic Church is sort of a focal point. Is that the central point in Mississauga for humanitarian relief efforts?
So I would say that there's certainly relief. There are certainly organizations and individuals gathering medical equipment, looking for donations from the church, St. Mary's Church. I know Father Panku has been very supportive as well. But I would suggest that Peter speak to the larger number of opportunities there are for donation, which he talked about, the UCC.org or the Red Cross or the UN humanitarian website as well. Peter, perhaps you can speak to the different opportunities there are to donate non-perishable goods or medical supplies or equipment, or just donate funds, and where is this central point, and which websites do you recommend, please?
Certainly, thank you. We're highly recommending that people donate to the different foundations. So there is, as I said, cufoundation.ca. Many times, if we're going to be sending aid and assistance, so sending food supplies from Canada to Ukraine is very costly. Right now, freighter cargo planes are incredibly expensive, obviously, because of the cost of fuel. So we're asking for people, and so we're actually buying product in Europe and sending it over. Domestically, there will be a requirement, obviously, for refugees, for other things like maybe clothing and such. But we're asking people not to do that just yet, because frankly, a lot of our churches and our community halls are overwhelmed. So much has come in; they have actually nowhere to store items at this point. So, really we're asking people to look at our website, ucc.ca. There's all kinds of organizations that are accepting donations, along with the CU Foundation, but there is also directives every now and then that's updated what is required. So we ask people to stay tuned for that. Thank you.
If I can just add, Declan, that the federal government is matching funds that are contributed to Red Cross, and I personally have made a donation to the Red Cross. Next question, please.
Next question comes from Khalid Salama at My Second Home TV.
Good morning. With the situation in Ukraine, of course, and the large number will be welcoming here in Mississauga, as you mentioned, maybe 20,000. What would be the situation when it comes to the housing? And also, I believe that majority of the incoming guests will be women and kids. Do we have to prepare in a special way? And also, is there something set for these kids to be included?
Well, it's a very important question, Khalid, and I think the 20,000 number does refer to refugees coming to the GTA, not just Mississauga, but certainly we will certainly get our share as a result of the big base of Ukrainian diaspora that live here around the church, etc. You know, that visual of those strollers on the railway station in Germany haunts me, and I thought how moving, how beautiful that they were so prepared, that there were strollers waiting for, the refugees coming in from Ukraine with families, with children. Help yourself to whatever best suits your needs. So I know that the community is preparing. I know that the community is taking inventory of housing and have offered to put up the new refugees that come in. And so, Peter, you probably know best. Why don't you respond as well, what may be needed and what preparations are being made?
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. On the housing front, obviously, that's going to be a critical thing. We have meetings over the next few days with different real estate companies and developers. I think they're going to have different proposals for us, so we're hoping to be able to find space. But I think for a lot of it, it'll be just temporary. It'll be worked through with the federal and the provincial government. Really, we're going to be asking families and people if they could take the refugees in for a short period of time until all that is worked out. As you can appreciate, these are going to be very large numbers coming in very quickly because there's already 2 million refugees that have made it out of Ukraine. So they're going to be kind of dispersing all over the world looking for places to find refuge. So as I say, we'll be working with different organizations and we will be issuing press releases and information going forward.
Thank you. My follow-up, Mayor Crombie, I was just following a couple of days ago the micro-mobility project or pilot, and still there are certain issues when it comes to enforcement and liability. What do you think?
So, Khalid, when you're talking about the micro-mobility, are you talking about which programs in particular?
That pilot for having e-scooters and bikes.
E-scooters, yeah. So we still are working through the potential and the different regulations that would have to be in place, but certainly is something we're working towards because, of course, it'll solve a lot of mobility issues here in Mississauga, first mile, last mile, and provide people with flexibility.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was your final question for today, Mayor Crombie.
Thank you all for joining us.